275, additional response for a vegetation fire in the area of Tomato House.
Hey Rich, good to see you.
How's it going, man?
So the wind's really starting to pick up. Immediate evacuation order to this zone.
Hey, we have a fast-moving wildfire. We need to send out an evacuation order.
Okay, confirming you want evacuation order for Mill Valley.
All right, so I'm sending officers into zone Mill E021. They're going to evacuate all the residents in that zone. I've also got officers going to major intersections to control traffic, and I'm going to be using Zone Haven to monitor that traffic in real time.
Fantastic. That's exactly what we need. Once we get your traffic plan dialed in, I'll get that communicated to my resources. I'm going to start plugging them in right now.
Welcome to this edition of Wildfire Watch, Beyond Go Bags, Marin's Evacuation Plan. I'm Rich Shortall, Fire Safe Marin's Executive Coordinator. Years of drought, record heat waves, and high winds have us all on edge, wondering if or when Marin will experience the kinds of wildfires that have ravished the West Coast over the last few years. It's a scary thought, but one that we can face and survive together with the right planning and preparation. Tonight, we're going to walk you through the evacuation plans used by Marin's public safety professionals that are designed to lower wildfire risks for our community, alert responders and residents to take necessary actions to protect families and homes, ensure that there is a well-coordinated and unified emergency response, and get everyone out safely. I am honored to have with us some of the leaders of Marin's emergency wildfire mitigation and response teams. Let me begin by introducing Mill Valley Police Chief Rick Navarro. Chief, welcome.
Good evening, thank you.
We have Marin County's Fire Chief, Jason Weber.
Thanks, Rich. It's great to be here.
And then we have the Executive Officer of the Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority, Mark Brown.
Good evening, Rich.
It's great to have all of you here. So there will be an opportunity for you to ask questions of our panel when they're finished. Please use the Q&A function on your screen and provide your questions in writing. Any questions that we cannot address during tonight's presentation will be answered and posted on the Fire Safe Marin website, where you will also be able to find a recording of tonight's presentation. So let's start with Mark. Mark, could you please give us an overview of what the Marin public agencies have done to prepare the county for wildfire evacuation?
You bet, I'd be happy to, and good evening, everybody. I'm so happy to be here, and I'm glad you guys are here with us tonight. We want you to know that Marin public safety officials, we have a plan. And that plan includes the first step, and that is having unified command with our fire and law enforcement officers standing side by side. We already have zones established throughout the entire county. So during the emergency, we don't have to think about how we design the evacuation area. It's already designed for us. We have established lines of communications and established lines of responsibility. So the fire officials and the law enforcement officials, our dispatch personnel, they all know exactly what they're supposed to be doing. We have pre-established notification messages, so all we have to do is fill in the gaps and we can send that message out efficiently to our residents who need to get out of the way. We also can provide maps for all of our residents to see, and we have pre-established shelters throughout the entire county. Chief Weber is going to talk a little bit more about how that whole plan comes together along with a coordinated fire response. Alerting is so important. If there's one thing you all do after tonight, if you register for Alert Marin, I would consider this evening a success. So Alert Marin is our primary notification tool. You also can get information through Nixle, Twitter, Facebook, and then there's also the NOAA weather radios for areas that have poor cell coverage. Long-range acoustical devices, which have basically replaced sirens. Wireless emergency alerting is appropriate from time to time. And then my favorite is door-to-door with our law enforcement officers going to the door, knocking on that door and making sure our residents are evacuating. To learn more about our notification systems, please go to the Fire Safe Marin website. We're also practicing, our public safety agencies practice with our communities, our firewise communities, on how to evacuate, because if you practice it once, it makes it so much better during that emergency. It is so much smoother. We have been improving the infrastructure evacuation routes because we know no matter what, there is going to be a traffic jam. These roads are just simply not designed to carry the traffic. Jason, have you left the ballpark and never gotten into a traffic jam when those roads have been designed for that type of activity. So we want to make sure that our evacuation routes are safe when you are on them, even when the fire is impacting that evacuation route. And then Chief Navarro and his law enforcement partners have many ways to control traffic, to make traffic flow more smoothly, and he's going to touch on that when he gets into his section. And then you've probably heard about areas of refuge. Those are not Plan A. However, we do have established areas of refuge. Should you not be able to get out of harm's way, it's a temporary location where you can be safe until we can get you all the way out of harm's way. And then shelters. Each of our communities have pre-identified shelters. We have systems in place to get those shelters opened up and available for residents to come in. And it may not be a shelter that's in your immediate community that we're sending you to. It may be a neighboring community that we send you to that shelter since it's further out of harm's way. And then I want to emphasize the importance of situational awareness. Starts with knowing where you live. What kind of wildfire threat is at your house? What kind of streets do you live on? How about your neighbors? Do your neighbors need help evacuating? Do you need help evacuating? Do your neighbors know that you would need help to evacuate? Are you aware when it's a red flag warning that perhaps you should have a little heightened sense of awareness during that period of time? Do you know about new and emerging fires that may be near your community, so perhaps you could start loading up your car before you ever get a notification? And we also have wildfire cameras that are available for you to see any fires that are in Marin. And if you want to learn more how to be personally prepared, please visit Fire Safe Marin's website. A tremendous amount of information how you can be more prepared and how you can develop your evacuation plan that's in line with our public safety officers' evacuation plans.
Well, Mark, thanks. That was a great overview. And I think for the audience, you might want to really think a little bit about situational awareness. We'll come back to that. But all of us have a role to play in evacuation planning here. So with that said, Chief Weber, what's the role of the fire department in all of this?
Great, thanks Rich, and thank you all for being with us here tonight. This is an important community conversation, and as was mentioned earlier, public safety can have all the plans in place, but if you're not prepared with your plan, our plans won't work. So your commitment to that is essential, and bring a couple neighbors along with you in that planning process. As I mentioned, I'm Jason Weber. I'm the Marin County and Ross Valley Fire Chief, but I think I speak for all the fire chiefs in this county, and we are committed together to ensure that we're working with our partners to get you all out in the event of an emergency. The fire department's role in an evacuation is one, our primary and principal role is to try to put the fire out so it doesn't become an evacuation problem. That's not always possible, and we know and we've seen under these wind conditions and some of the fire we've seen in the last 5 or 6 years especially, we sometimes have to turn and work with our law enforcement partners and go door to door to get people out. But I think often overlooked is something, especially in Marin, early in an incident, and that's to shelter in place. So you may receive an order to shelter in place versus evacuate. And what we want you to do during that time period is make sure your go bag's ready, you've got your car turned around, you've got your animals loaded, you know where your family is and they're ready to go. All of that can be done as we're having you shelter in place so we can get our fire equipment into the incident. If we can do that effectively, we can probably put the fire out most of the time and reduce that risk and need for evacuation. If law enforcement working with us does give an evacuation order or warning, that's the time to leave. And Chief Navarro will talk a little bit about the importance of that. But if you receive a shelter in place order, we need you to do just that. Be prepared, even be in your car and ready to go, have your stuff packed, and when we move that from a shelter in place to an order and ask you to leave, do it promptly. Mutual aid. California has one of the best mutual aid systems in the world. California, Marin County participates in that. All of our fire agencies do. We really in this county act as one when the bell goes off. So a fire response in this county does not matter what jurisdiction you're in. We collectively have all agreed and respond together. That's the same thing for aircraft. So on the initial dispatch, so any vegetation fire in this county that has any significant threat, at the same time those fire engines and law enforcement are being dispatched to mitigate that incident, so is aircraft. And our aircraft predominantly comes from the Sonoma County Airport, the fixed wing, and then the rotary wing come from several different locations around us. But they can be in the county within about 12 minutes. So it's a short flight time and it's a very effective tool in conjunction with our ground resources. But at the same time, if additional resources are needed, like engines or law enforcement, that's put into play. All of this is happening seamlessly behind the scenes, allowing our firefighters and our frontline commanders to do what they need to do to mitigate that incident, while others are working behind the scenes to backfill and order additional resources. Unified command is something you've heard multiple times tonight. It's an important piece of this. The chiefs on either side of me I've worked with extensively over the last 20 plus years here in this county. We work extremely well together. We know each other. It's very effective. And when that incident occurs, and Chief Navarro is going to talk about it, we are standing next to each other, making sure the decisions we made are unified and that we have a clear understanding of who's doing what and when. It works really well. Infrastructure improvements. Mark talked a little bit about the importance of this. Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority was created because of the needs. We did an analysis after the 2017 fires up in Sonoma County. Our 2006 Community Wildfire Protection Plan highlighted this. These were all factors that played a role in creating the Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority. And some of the first and foremost work that was done was work around evacuation routes. It's giving you a safer place to be as you evacuate from your neighborhood. And it's been one of our primary focuses and continues to be with that program. The other is shaded field breaks. You hear more about the Ross Valley shaded field break, or work down on Highway 1, or anywhere in this county, Novato, Santa Fe. That work's important because it's going to slow the spread of fire, maybe not slow, but slow the intensity, reduce the intensity of fire, allowing your home to survive, but also the other is allowing you to get out safely during that time of an evacuation. So again, thanks for joining us tonight. This is an important conversation, and Rich, as always, thank you and Fire Safe Marin for doing an amazing job.
Well, thank you very much, Chief. I appreciate that. Great overview. We've all seen the fire departments at work. I know that they do a fantastic job in Marin, and most of us do. But I think a really good takeaway, again, for our audience tonight is shelter in place versus evacuation. Every time we see a little bit of smoke or even a little bit of flame, that doesn't necessarily mean that we're evacuating. The smart thing to do is pay attention to the orders that you are getting from public safety. And sometimes the best thing is just stay where you are. Okay, well, Chief Navarro, I know that there's a lot going on in Mill Valley, but maybe you could tell us a little bit about the role in law enforcement, which is so critical but not always thought about in the same way in these events.
Great, thank you, and good evening, everyone. I appreciate you having us here tonight. This is absolutely important in our community with the drought and the fire dangers that we experience here in Northern California. We in law enforcement are responsible for the evacuation order of our community. So we go to what you have heard, the Unified Command. You saw it at the beginning during the opening, that we stand hip to hip in our Unified Command. So it's law and fire communicating about the dangers, about what areas need to be evacuated, and then we communicate with our Office of Emergency Services and our Communications Center and start the evacuation process. We have very specific sirens that are the European style sirens that we will activate and drive through the neighborhood, and it's called a high-low siren, and that will notify. If you hear the high-low, it's time to go. So we'll drive through those affected neighborhoods and play that siren, and also go door to door and get on our PA system and let everyone know that they need to evacuate, and they need to evacuate now. So hopefully prior to that you have received some type of warning, you know that your community is under a red flag warning, and then when it's time to evacuate, you'll hear those sirens, you'll get the notification like Mark Brown has said through our social media platforms, and we hope that you register through Alert Marin so that you are prepared. That's another piece that we definitely want all of our community members to do, is to be prepared. We talk about go beyond a go bag, but a go bag is really important, and also having a reunification plan. And I know that we'll get to that in a little bit, but I just want to reemphasize that that's really important to our community.
Well, that's great. Thank you, Chief. Reunification plans, very important. But also, I know that in Mill Valley has been working on evacuations for a very long time. Can you tell us a few of the things that you're doing uniquely in Mill Valley?
I'm very proud of the work that the community has done in Mill Valley. Not just our community members, our government officials, not just the police department, the fire department, our city council members. We also have a very strong emergency preparedness committee and our CERT volunteers. They have done a lot of great work. We have a community of 14,500 residents with approximately 6,000 households. And we have 2 major thoroughfares to get out of the community. And so our former mayor, John McCauley, developed a partnership with Google. And Google assisted us in doing a study and how long would it take to evacuate our community. And that assisted us in developing our traffic plans to get community members out. So we actually had members of the community volunteer to come in on a Saturday morning, and we had 220 of them line up on East Blythedale and go to what we call a super community refuge area, and that is at Hockey Park and Tamalpais High School. So we are directing traffic out to 101, clear the roadways down in the valley so that those people that are vulnerable up in the highlands in Mount Tam and Scotts Valley and what have you, have a roadway, a path to get out. We will direct those traffic vehicles off the roadway into a super community refuge area, and then once that opens up, then we'll move the additional vehicles back out to 101. We have 3 trailers that have our cones, our traffic plan, our cones, and we pre-position those trailers in very specific areas whenever there's a red flag warning that goes into effect. And then also we have a pre-populated Nixle alert that goes out to our business community for all the employees to move their vehicles on a red flag warning and get off of our main thoroughfares so that we can have that traffic plan ready to go if needed.
Well, that is very exciting, and I think that the residents of Mill Valley should feel very comfortable that you have great plans in place, you're practicing those plans, and you've really done a lot of thinking about evacuation. And that's true of other parts of Marin too, but I think this is just representative of where we're going with all of this, so it's great. Well, again, thank you for the presentations, but now let's get to some of the questions that have come in from the audience. So bear with me a little bit, I'm kind of navigating through the script here. But one of the first questions that really struck me, because I have to say it is the most common question that I get, is I'm concerned because I might be stuck in traffic on a major thoroughfare like Sir Francis Drake Boulevard. If I'm stuck in traffic, I'm at high risk to be burned up.
Yeah, Rich, and I think that, you know, we all see those vivid pictures of burnt out cars alongside roads or where fire has been. But when you look at the actual facts, and I know Todd Lundo has done a lot of research in this arena, people aren't dying in their vehicles. They're dying because they didn't heed the warnings of law enforcement and evacuate. They were late in their evacuation. But those that got on to paved streets and headed to a safer direction, by far, and it is the safest place to be. So people need to get in their car and go early. But also why we're doing all of this work on our evacuation routes around vegetation management and lowering that fuel reduction and getting people onto those thoroughfares is because we know they're safer there than on a hillside street waiting to leave.
Yeah, I know one of the things we stress at Fire Safe Marin, get to the valley floor, the lowest point. We all know heat, smoke go up and away from us. If you get down there, it's never fun to wait in traffic, but you're gonna survive. And you're going to survive without any problem whatsoever. What about those who say, well, you know, I don't want to be stuck there, so I know the secret fire road and I'm going to go out on the fire road?
It's one of Mark's favorite questions.
Yes, we hear that question all the time. And if you look at fatalities of firefighters, it's usually because they went up and away from the fire. Going up above a fire is exactly where the fire is going, and you're actually placing yourself more at risk. Additionally, the few fatalities that have occurred on wildfires in cars is when people left the paved roadway and they went on fire roads. That's where people have died. And so we implore you, the best route for you is downhill, even if the fire is that direction, and we call it tactical maneuvering. Don't go beyond a position where you know you are safe. And then once you see if you come up to a turn that perhaps is impacted by fire, it's likely to be impacted only for a couple of minutes. And after it's safe to proceed through that turn, then you go to the next safe spot where you can continue to see where you're at. It's kind of like going through a traffic signal. You don't go through an intersection, or at least you're not supposed to. Go through an intersection until you can get all the way through that intersection. And that's how I consider, and this is what I've done through my fire career as I've driven through fire areas.
So related to that, we know traffic's a problem. How important is for people to try to carpool, or at least not take 3 family cars?
That is,
I'll be glad to answer that. That's really important because we pushed that in Mill Valley. We really expressed to our community to take one vehicle, and if you can take your neighbors with you, just go in one vehicle. We have 6,000 households, and that's a lot of vehicles to get off the roadway to a safe place. So one vehicle per household. If you could take your neighbors, please take your neighbors. It will save time. It'll help us clear the roadways, allow public safety vehicles to get in and fight those fires.
Yep. That's great. Alert and warning, what's the difference, and are they complementary, between Alert Marin and Nixle?
So they're complementary, they are very different. You need to sign up for the alert system, and the reason for that is that's where we're going to provide very clear direction and orders and warnings and shelter in place. Nixle is where we share information. As Chief Navarro mentioned, they'll send out a Nixle the day of a red flag event, reminding business owners to not have their employees park on thoroughfares that they may need to use. That's information. But Alert Marin is where we put out the orders and the warnings. So we suggest you be in both, but the absolute is Alert Marin for our warning system.
Yeah. Maybe I'll ask Chief Navarro about this because it's kind of nearby. Maybe some of the point was missed, but a person's saying, well, is there an evacuation plan for Tam Valley?
And I used to work for the sheriff's office, and so I know that there is an evacuation plan. They have evacuation drills as well, and they do have their plans. I'm assuming that they have them online at this point, but you'll learn about those if you go to those evacuation drills that they have had at some of the elementary schools, and they'll discuss what our plan is for that specific area, where to go, where your community refuge area is. And it is really important that you get involved and you really understand what your plan is and how are you going to get your family out safely.
Rich, can I
Yes,
add on to
please.
that real quick? If you go to the Fire Safe Marin website and go into the evacuation planning, the areas that have pre-designed maps are already on there, and it shows your evacuation route, how to get there, and also go to emergency.marincounty.org to see the entire county's map.
So that's a good point, though, I think, on this. The entire county, there's no part of the county where there is no evacuation plan. All the county is mapped. Everything is pre-figured out by different zones to determine if we need to evacuate, how the notifications, who needs to hear that, whatnot. One of the questions, I live in Sleepy Hollow, so there's a question about Butterfield Road. That's the only road in and out. So, quote, what's the evacuation plan? If you're in an area where there's only one road, that's the plan. That is the lowest point. We've been talking about that. You get down there. Law enforcement will be there to control traffic. Not saying it's all going to be perfect, but the real planning is, what is your family plan? And we're sort of in a new area in Fire Safe Marin where we're saying, what if you get an immediate evacuation order? What does that mean that you're supposed to do, Chief?
That means leave now. That doesn't mean gather things. If you have a go bag by the door, grab that. But that's really the extent. It means we need you out, and we need you out now. And I think to your point regarding Butterfield Road, or for any road in Marin County that is one way in, one way out, we will protect that at all costs. So that means the firefighters, the law enforcement officers will significantly risk their lives to make sure that roadway stays open to get the residents out. We will clear roads, we will clear vehicles, and if it means we have to push them out of the way with our own trucks, we'll do that. We will keep that thoroughfare open, or we will direct people to shelter in place or go to a safe refuge area that's identified. So that will become the priority, and we may even shift gears and stop fighting fire, which seems kind of counterintuitive, but the priority is life first, then property. And we will, again, in a unified voice and in a unified way, we will make sure that those orders are clear and our priorities for that incident are set.
So when we talk about an evacuation plan, has your family thought through, what would I do if I have to leave in 5 or 10 minutes? I mean, really thought it through? What if you get an evacuation warning? What does that mean?
So that's a great opportunity to make sure those nice to have things like documents or pictures, you have time to load your vehicle with them. Make sure your vehicle's facing out, make sure your vehicle has fuel, those nice to do things that you know that your animals are taken care of. And I think if you're somebody with access or functional needs, that may be a time for you to go, because it may be too stressful. The time may not allow under an order. So consider that. And I think that one thing we have to mention is that we only have so many law enforcement and firefighters on duty every day. And these incidents can expand quickly, and our focus has to be everybody. But we really need neighbors to watch after neighbors, and especially in a community that has a lot of aging people or those with functional needs. It's incumbent that those neighbors make sure those individuals are out safely. Take them with you. Have a plan for them. We have to watch out. I live on a street with a lot of older neighbors. Our plan is to make sure they're out first, and if they can't get out, take them with us. Because law enforcement and fire are not going to have the capacity to load all of them up into our cars.
Right. So if you're doing your planning, which you need to do, that's the most important thing, you need to be thinking through what are you going to be doing if you have 5 or 10 minutes to get out? What are you going to be doing if you have an hour or two, or maybe more? And one of the things we say on that is, that's when people start thinking, what can I put in my car? If it doesn't fit on your couch, you're not taking it. That's a good practice to do. See what fits on there, because that's about what you're taking. So it's another way to kind of think through what you're going to do. So evacuation planning, particularly if there's one road out, a lot of it is personal, so that you're able to make that move when the time comes out there. I think that's real important. One of the things that the county has is a new, very important website. It's the emergency portal. We'll put that in the chat, but it's emergency.marincounty.org. And you want to tell us a little bit about how that works?
Sure. Emergency.marincounty.org is our single location where you can get information on any emergency in Marin. For the evacuations, it has an evacuation tab that shows where the evacuation orders are, where there's evacuation warnings, and it helps give you an indication of if the evacuation orders or warnings are getting closer to you. But also it has information about the fire status or whatever emergency, what the status of that emergency is, where the shelters are, and it gives you great and consistent direction, and as part of the unified command. Nothing ends up on that website unless the unified commanders have agreed they need it to be on that website to share with the public. So emergency.marincounty.org.
Great. Well, I'm approaching the last question because we're running out of time, and I do want to remind the audience, there's a lot of questions on here we couldn't get to today. Many of them are very specific to a particular region. We will provide those answers. Give us a couple days, they'll be up on our website. You'll be able to see what those responses are to those. But my last question is, we touched on it a very little bit at the opening video, and that's Zone Haven. What is Zone Haven, and is Zone Haven up and running and in use?
So Zone Haven is an emergency management platform that we have instituted throughout Marin. It is in service. In fact, that map that I talked about on emergency.marincounty.org is the Zone Haven map. It's a tool that allows our emergency responders to manipulate our management or our evacuation plan that we have, and it connects directly with our emergency notification system. It does not replace Alert Marin. It simply complements Alert Marin, but it is up and running. And if you go to the Zone Haven website, you actually see all of the Marin zones as well as our emergency portal.
Wonderful. That's great that we have that in place, and I know it's a wonderful and important tool that we're using. So again, I wish we had more time because I think we're kind of getting into this conversation right here. And again, to the audience, we'll get the answers to you that we couldn't provide tonight. But with that, I would like to thank all of our guests. It's been great to have you. We've learned a lot about Marin's evacuation plans. Re-emphasize, there is an evacuation plan everywhere, but there's no substitute for personal planning. It's a big part. And as a reminder, you can view recording of tonight's presentation on our website and YouTube channel. If you've never been to the YouTube channel, check it out. There's a lot of information on there. For those of you who have a few more minutes, we prepared a collection of short but very interesting videos on the topic of evacuation, and they're going to follow right after that. So with that, I would like to say goodnight, stay safe, and a reminder that wildfire season is not over. So again, thank you everybody for being here.